We are with Lorna Phillipson, who's running for Congress in the 4th District against Congressman Chris Smith, who's been long entrenched in this district. Ms. Phillipson is a Democrat. And before we get into some of the questions that I had prepared, I want to get your impression on what's going on in Congress right now in terms of the gun debate.
It's about time that we finally made an effort on this. The Democratic side has been in the forefront of gun sense, gun control, however you want to call it, politicize it. But this last massacre in Orlando, it was a hate crime, it was against the LGBT community, and it was against an immigrant community, the Puerto Ricans. Although the Puerto Ricans are actually part of the United States, people think they're not, but they are. But this is just a long line of massacres of American citizens and others around the country, and it has to stop. And the only way we're going to stop it is to not permit people to have access to semi-automatic weapons and other guns. Whether you want to do it piecemeal and just say we're going to do it against the semi-automatic, fine. Start somewhere. And at least I'm pleased to see the Democratic congressman making a stand or making a sit-in, as the case may be, where they sat in Congress for hours and hours and brought over our Senator Booker as well to make a point that he was with them. And I know that 95% of the Americans are with them. We have a lot of momentum. Every town has been pursuing this. Mothers are pursuing this, and obviously people of all communities are against having semi-automatic weapons in the hands of crazy people. And yes, it is crazy people who do this. In many instances, not a normal person would go out and shoot, but slowing down their accessibility would be a huge improvement from no control what we have now. So for me, this is a good thing, and I am very pleased that they did that, despite Ryan wanting to have a veto vote to override a presidential veto, even though he didn't have the votes, but he tried to force that issue as well. But I'm glad that our congressman prevailed, and I look forward to their success.
Okay, now getting back to some of the questions that I had prepared ahead of time. First of all, you're not a well-known commodity across the state. We have a statewide audience, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, some of the skills you have that would help you should you be elected to Congress, and why you're running.
I started out as a nice little middle class kid in Seagirt, New Jersey, going to Manasquan High School. Went to Montclair State, studied fine arts, and you're probably thinking, why is she going from fine arts to this? I didn't stay in fine arts once I left school. I had fantastic teachers because they all came out of New York, but I ended up working for a gentleman in New York City on Wall Street. He was trading something very new at the time, their derivative products. It was financial futures, and I was his assistant. And after 6 months, he realized that my head for facts and figures and strategy was much more important than his bookkeeping. So I got moved into a trading position, and that was very quick, 6 months. And I got moved up very quickly. I worked for 4 different international banks. I managed the bank's money, meaning I didn't deal with individuals, I didn't deal with corporations. I dealt with other banks, handling that, and with the Federal Reserve Bank. $8 billion in assets for the most part. And that was my career until the mid-90s, when I realized that there has to be life after banking. When I watched the greed and the aggression take over, and I was dealing with people who were like Donald Trump, seriously type A personalities who bully and intimidate people, and that's not the way the real world should be. And I moved on and out from there, worked for a technology company in the UK for a brief while until we sold that company, which meant that I came back to the United States. And I came back to the US, was with family when 9/11 happened. And that for me had taken a long time to get over, and I moved to California to be as far away from possible as memories of my friends that perished there, because working down there, I knew people at Cantor Fitzgerald and AIG and Eurobrokers, and that was a defining moment in my life. So for me, when people ask you, how do you feel about security in America? I agree that we can't have it as secure as we would like. Building a wall along the southern border is not going to help, but there are ways that we can make our country secure, and I know that Homeland Security is doing their best on that. In Silicon Valley, I was working with CEOs on business strategy and how to grow their companies. I was dealing with entrepreneurs on setting up companies and making it happen. Very bright individuals, highly technical work, and I am not what you would consider a techie, but I'm sort of a nerd, I suppose, in that regard. I understand the math sciences. I understand how much that is important to the future of America. We have well-qualified people in the United States. We need better schools to support that so that we do have, going forward, a well-qualified, well-educated workforce, because that's the future of America. Education is extremely important to me in that regard. So there was a point where my mother was not doing well. And my sisters sort of guilted me into coming back to New Jersey to help them with my mother, who's getting up in years, and they agreed that I would regret not being here with her. And once I was here, all these years I've been getting Chris Smith's newsletters, following what he's been doing. And I got here, and in speaking with people, I recognized that things are not the way they should be. That there's so much going on in this district that is being neglected because the man lives in Virginia. There is so much being neglected because he's concentrating on certain issues in Congress and forgetting everything else. Not the way it should be, because he writes a very good newsletter, or his staff writes a very good newsletter, talking about the things that he believes in, but when I look at his voting record, that is not the case.
So one of the things that Mr. Smith does is he puts an abortion prevention rider on just about every bill in Congress, or he tries to.
Yes.
How would your stand be on women's issues, reproductive rights?
I am pro-choice. I honestly, when I went to college and off of my parents' medical insurance, I used Planned Parenthood for 10 years, twice a year. I used it for contraception, I used it for tests, I did not use it for an abortion. Fortunately, I did not need one because I had contraception. Unfortunately, Chris Smith has written 22 bills to ban contraception. For a man who wants to get rid of the need for an abortion, he's not trying very hard if he wants to remove birth control as an option. So for me, we are very much at extremes on that one. And he's one of the guys who has pressured behind the scenes to shut down Congress every time there's a budget issue because they throw a Planned Parenthood bill on. I obviously disagree with that, because I believe that women should have access to affordable, effective birth control and health care. And the most we can do for them it's important because it also helps their families. It's not just about the women. They're usually wives, their mothers, their sisters. It's a family reason.
So let's jump back to something you mentioned before. You have some experience in the financial services industry.
Yes, sir.
Senator Elizabeth Warren has been pushing for
Yes.
some reforms in that industry. Care to comment?
I agree with Senator Warren that we need to reinstate something like Glass-Steagall, even though the banks have now consolidated to the point where it will be very difficult to divide them up again. But we did it with AT&T years ago and split that up, and they've been successful. But there is no reason why we should have these big, giant conglomerate banks managing your money and managing their money and mingling it together, which is what they do, and they risk it. And having been a bank trader on that side, I know where the controls failed. And I can see why 2008 happened. I sat in the movie theater watching that movie, and for me, I could have narrated it because you could see exactly where the rating agencies failed, where the government failed because we took away all the regulations, where the people themselves failed because they got greedy and thought they could circumvent. There was no compliance. And as a lot of people say, well, we don't need all this extra regulation. Unfortunately, when you have the fox watching the hen house, you get a 2008. And that has punished us and is still punishing us. There are still people in this area and around the country who are suffering because they haven't recovered from their savings. They've lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, they've not perhaps gotten a well-paying full-time job again. And I know several who are extremely well-educated, who had exceptionally good jobs and were very good at them years ago, but they lost them and they have never recovered. And that will be a drain on us as we go forward because they've had to take Social Security early or other issues. We've absorbed all of the debt that they couldn't pay if they declared bankruptcy or if they had their homes foreclosed. So in a sense, we the taxpayers had taken the total brunt of that because somebody back in the day decided this was a good idea. So for me, I agree totally with Elizabeth Warren that we can put tighter controls and reins on the financial institutions, and I would push for that going forward. Absolutely.
Another issue that's facing us over the next several decades is the environment. We've seen global warming rise. The Antarctic has kind of been the canary in the coal mine, showing
Yes.
temperatures rising.
True.
We have a state where pipelines are crisscrossing all over the state. What would your priorities be in Congress in terms of the environment?
Even our military has accepted that global warming is an issue, and they are trying to address it, and they're doing it. They're circumventing Congress to make that happen. But for the rest of us as individuals, we are bearing, again, the brunt of that. Every time there's a storm, it seems to be more and more severe, which with the coastal flooding along New Jersey, it's a huge problem for us because that economy, that coastal economy, covers just more than that particular region. It affects all of New Jersey because if they're not making money, they're not making taxes, they're not putting revenues into the state, it affects everything the state does. So for us, that is extremely important. And as individuals, there are still homes along the Bay Shore in northern Monmouth and in southern Ocean that are struggling after Sandy. It's 3 years, they're still not in their homes. That's been ridiculous. So there's so much we need to do on the environment overall, but there are specific issues, as you mentioned, the pipelines. That's a tough one because we all think, well, this is great. We need gas. We have my gas stove, and I want to have gas for my gas stove. But a lot of the new pipelines that are coming through are pipelines that are so that they can export the oil. It's not even going to stay in the U.S. So it does provide jobs for the for the pipe fitters and those who are trying to set it up, but that's limited, and there's got to be a better way. And where they put them is just unreasonable. Sometimes they put them through districts that are totally unsuitable for this. And I realize that a lot of them are also replacing pipes, not just new ones. They're actually infrastructure repairs or replacement of former pipelines that have not succeeded well, and they need to be done. But I think we need a lot more of a discussion with people in each town that it goes through, because just ramming it down the throats of the taxpayers in New Jersey is really not the best solution for this. There are better ways. We also have a need for solar and wind energy. I am so glad that I stood with Senator Menendez and Booker and others in Asbury Park a few months back, where they fought against drilling on the eastern seaboard, which would not have just been New Jersey, but from Maine all the way down the coast, because for every coastal community in America, that is a huge dilemma for us. Yeah, we can't afford an oil spill. So I'm looking forward to being in Congress and working on green energy for going forward. This is the 21st century, not the 20th, and we have to move off of our dependence from oil.
Another issue that's been in the news is gay rights. We've kind of won the gay marriage issue, thanks to the Supreme Court, no thanks to Congress,
True.
or even the New Jersey legislature. But that's not the end of the battle. There are transgender rights, there are bullying issues, and there are things that the state should do, and there are things that the federal government should do. The Republicans really want to dump this on the individual states. Where do you stand on things like the bathroom issues, bullying, things like that?
I stay with the LGBTQ community, and I've been with them for many years. In fact, bridesmaid at my wedding many years ago came out when she was in college. So I have been friends, and I know many people and family who are of the LGBT community. And as far as I'm concerned, you cannot control who you are or who you love. And that's something that we need to recognize. The problem that we have is the bullying, the intimidation, the gay bashing, and now a total massacre, because essentially, yes, they're saying it's a terrorist, but he specifically targeted a gay club. And I was stunned to see how few Republicans, including my opponent, who totally ignored that issue. You know, they're all very sorry, their prayers are with the families, and that is fantastic. But nothing was said about the hatred to the LGBT community and their contribution to that happening. Between that one is a triple whammy. The gun issue, possible terrorist activity, and the LGBT community. Actually 4 immigrants, because he targeted primarily people who did not live in the United States. So for me, that's huge. I've stood on stage next to Babs Sipperstein, who is a transgender individual for our Democratic Party here in New Jersey, and she is a remarkable woman. And I have been talking with the LGBT caucus here in Monmouth County in particular, and others around the states, and they know that I am with them and that I believe that every individual is an individual, and we have to, not that we have to, is that it's a moral right for them to exist as they are as individuals, and something has to change in Congress to make that happen.
So we've talked about a number of issues. Let me throw it back to you and ask you, as you've been going around the district campaigning, what are some of the things that your constituents are telling you that we may not have covered today?
It's interesting because you go from town to town and you wouldn't think it'd be so different, but it's interesting how each town has a totally separate issue to deal with. Shrewsbury's trying to deal with a bike path issue. It may not seem serious, but if for people who are recreational or want to use a bike to go to work, nice environmentally sound way to go. How do they go forward with that? Way out in Allentown near Hamilton, they're dealing with a sewer problem because their pipes are so old that infrastructure has to be repaired. So a lot of them, surprisingly, seem to be environmentally related, which is what is interesting. But all of them affect their pocketbook because they can't afford to pick it up. Manasquan High School, my high school, been talking to the mayor there, and it is a sending district. So the towns in the area send their students there, and they pay a tuition, which is great. But the school has not really had an upgrade since the 1950s. And they keep putting out bond issues to get this done, but the brunt of that goes on to Manasquan residents, not the other towns. They cannot pass that on. So there are a lot of things that New Jersey needs to recognize, that the state legislature could recognize, that in Congress I hope to make some event, because so much of what happens in the state is mandated by the federal government, and how they pay for it is another story. As far as I'm concerned, it's been a shell game ever since Reagan came in. Reagan, everybody applauded because he lowered your income taxes. He lowered the top bracket from 65 to 35%, and that's fantastic. But what it meant is that 30% of the taxes that we used to get got shuffled down to the states, where they had to recover that or cut. And when the state couldn't do it, they just borrowed more money, which is why we've had another downgrade. Thank you very much, Governor Christie. And then when they couldn't do it, they passed it down to your counties, and it's in your property taxes. So if you wonder why our property taxes are so high, it's because we've had this little bit of a three-card Monte shell game. We've just shifted the money around. Nothing has really improved. You have an illusion of saving taxes in the federal government, and even worse, every New Jersey taxpayer puts money into the federal government, but we only get 65 cents back. So we are subsidizing others. So if you're wondering why we're having such a struggle to cover things, it's because our money is not coming back to us to spend on essential needs here in New Jersey, like fair education. Each town does have their own specific problem. And in that regard, I've been talking with a lot of mayors in the area. I cover towns in Monmouth, Ocean, and Mercer counties. And even within those three counties, it's a dramatic difference between how they manage their counties and how the towns are run. So it's important to me to meet them, meet residents. I'm trying to get into every single town at least twice before the election, and I hope I can have you come out to meet me, and I'd like to talk.
Okay, along those lines, final question. If people do want to get in touch with you, donate, volunteer to the campaign, where should they go, online or call on the phone?
Well, you can call our phone. Our campaign number is 917-837-7144. We're in Spring Lake Heights. There is a website. It is www.phillipsonforcongress.com. On there you have information about me, upcoming events, a place to donate, a place to volunteer, and we will be listing upcoming meet and greets and events where we like to see you, and hopefully I can meet much more of our constituents out here. And speaking of constituents, I'd like to add one more thing. People always say that Congressman Smith has fantastic constituency services. And I'd like to remind you that that is essentially his customer service desk. It's as if your phone broke down. You're not calling Tim Cook, head of Apple. You are calling customer service. Smith's job is to promote good legislation in Congress. He is your politician. He's your legislator. He's his policy. He is not the customer service guy. His staff does a fantastic job. I believe he is not, and I believe I would do a much better job replacing him and representing you in Congress.
Lorna Phillipson, thank you very much.
Thank you.